what exactly from the quarterback perspective, Spencer, are you going to be locked in on?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the second half of the game is even more important or more interesting than
I was thinking about that. What's funny is that, I still have not found a way for at some point tomorrow for me to squeeze in mowing my lawn. I'm doing the backyard.
That's always the problem.
I know, and I used to always hate too when people would call up and be like, glad the Browns suck now. I can mow my lawn. And it's like, all right, there's a lot of time in the day, right? You can do a lot of different things. We can figure this out. But we got Charlotte now signed up for this music class that we're going to, and tomorrow's gonna be a pretty packed day. And so I was thinking, I'm like, could I? Is there an opportunity somewhere? Now, obviously, I won't because I'm gonna watch this. The starters are playing in the first half, at least for the first 20 to 25 snaps. Obviously, I'm locked into these games. It is what it is. But I was definitely thinking about where my interest is, and my interest is so much more in the back half of this game than the front half.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's. Early in the game, I want to see the offense because last year the offense was such a disaster, and it looked that way in the they didn't really get a chance to see it in the preseason because obviously Deshaun didn't play that last game. They sat a bunch of guys, but they had plans to do that. But even in the joint practices and stuff, it was just so disjointed. Couldn't move the football. Couldn't even get the snap off half the time because there were so many penalties. Mm-hmm. I want to see the first. I want to see the first team do some things. I want to see them go out and be all right, we're running things efficiently. Joe Flacco's getting everybody there, and guys are going in motion, and there's not penalties, and they're able to go up and down the field a little bit because that will make me at least believe on some level that the first teams were going to be ready to go week one. But I am once I sort of get through those first couple series and just kind of get a sense of where that group's at. My attention is 100% just all right, get me to the second half or however long we need to wait to see Dillon Gabriel, to see Shedeur Sanders. I want to see what those two guys are going to do because we know that the number one quarterback job is that's been decided. Right. It's been decided. Now I want to know if there's anything Shedeur can do in this setting that maybe gets him above Dillon Gabriel.
Do you think there is anything that Shedeur can do in this setting?
I'm going to assume not because going back to what we were just saying, they have said every step of the way that no matter what Shedeur does, Shedeur could help 100 grandmothers in Cleveland walk across the crosswalk on some street.
It'd be odd if Stefanski valued that in a big way. He's like, I didn't know about this guy.
He could adopt
then he started
all
walking
the stray puppies in Cleveland, and then he could have a perfect day in this preseason game and throw 3 touchdown passes and 300 yards. He could finish tomorrow with the same stats as Jackson Dart, and I don't think it would be enough for him to supplant Dillon Gabriel on the depth chart.
Well,
because at this point,
so what are we watching tomorrow for then? I mean, there's intrigue attached to it, clearly.
I think so.
But if nothing's going to actually change, are we the fools in this equation? And I can say this now at 5:25. I could not say this at 2:25. But are we just the idiots then?
I think if you're watching preseason, I think we're all kind of fools anyway for reading into these preseason games.
I could be mowing my lawn, as we established. I could be doing a lot of other things.
But I think
not that I would, but we could be doing other things.
I think from a fan perspective, though, it's different. The evaluation, I think a lot of people are going into this game understanding that the quarterback depth chart is what the quarterback depth chart is. But the fun in it for us is if Dillon Gabriel stinks, we get to sit there and jump on social media. Half of the entertainment of sports these days is being on social media to just see how people are melting down or celebrating or whatever.
I don't know how much
that's what the fans are going to be able to do.
I don't know how much longer they can try to sell you the idea that Dillon Gabriel is good at football if he stinks up the joint tomorrow. I just don't know how long they can do that. And you can make a legitimate argument that
they tried to sell us Deshaun Watson for as long as they did.
Game 2 of the preseason let them off the hook in a way that was very interesting. It's not that Dillon Gabriel was actually great. No, he was really, really good for one drive, and everyone made up their mind that was all they needed to see. He had 2 turnovers. PFF ranked him 28 out of 33 players on the offensive side of the ball. As far as legitimately grading out Dillon Gabriel, he wasn't good. His passer rating was 35 points fewer than what Shedeur Sanders was in his week 1 performance. In my opinion, that was night and day. But people just wanted to see Dillon Gabriel basically not puke on himself. And so he didn't do that. And so in a weird way, he passed the bar for a lot of people. But I want to know what happens if Dillon Gabriel stinks up the joint in the first drive and then kind of looks like what he did really for that other part of that second game where it's just kind of fine. There's nothing impressive that we saw with Dillon Gabriel. There's really impressive things we saw with Shedeur Sanders. There was nothing impressive we saw with Dillon Gabriel. What's the reaction like? And can they continue to tell us that what matters away from the field matters more than what happens on the field? Because that, I think, is going to be the biggest crime.
Yeah, listen, I think what happens is nothing changes with the depth chart, and I think everyone's accepted that, but I think that it just allows us as fans, and you and me specifically, as like Shedeur.
It's just another arrow in our quiver,
yeah,
so to speak.
We just get to sort of sit there and be like, we just get to basically sit there and rip the organization more and be like, what are they waiting for? What's going on?
Well, ultimately what it does is it fractures the idea that we think that they have a clue.
Yes, that's very true. I do think, though, like the point of watching that second half or watching how these two quarterbacks do is going to be that, like, you have this war online of, well, the Browns are doing one thing, but we think another thing should be happening, and it's just more fodder for people to be like, we think Shedeur's better, and we've seen evidence of him being better, so why is this happening? And just continuing to pile on Dillon Gabriel and boost up Shedeur Sanders, and then you'll have your few people here or there that are like, well, Shedeur did it against the threes, because he's probably going to be third in the order, as we know, and Dillon did it against the twos. That's the other thing that I'm going to find sort of annoying. Like, if the point here is we're trying to evaluate them on the same scale, okay, they each got a preseason game. Shedeur got to go against the first team of the Panthers, and those drives didn't end in touchdowns, but he was okay, and then he sort of figured it out as he kind of got going against the twos for Carolina. Dillon Gabriel went solely against pretty much the twos in Philly, and that's fine. But now it's like the last, if Shedeur had the better debut, Dillon had a fine debut with the two turnovers thrown in, but we all agree that Shedeur's was better. And so if now it becomes like this, well, there's always that's the problem with this entire thing. Is like there's always like a cop out one way or the other. It's always like, well,
I can see you making the cop out in your head right now.
And the organization, because the organization's going to do that. They're going to be like, well, we take everything into account in the preseason, and who they were going against matters.
The problem is
that's the stuff they use and like throw back in our faces as fans, like we're stupid, and they're like, well, Dillon did it against the twos, so yeah, like of course it was a little harder for him to move the football, but yeah, Shedeur had 3 touchdowns because he was going against the threes. It's like, okay, so how are we supposed to evaluate these guys then? We're not in the room, and we're not in the quarterback room to see this superhuman computer brain that Dillon Gabriel has that you guys apparently love.
They keep giving us examples and things that we can't see, and that's why they keep doing that. And we don't even know how true it is that Dillon Gabriel has the supercomputer brain. We don't even know. we don't. I mean, it's what they tell us. We don't really know that. And we also, when they tell us that Shedeur is so far behind for reasons X, Y, and Z,
what was his
it's not anything
score?
I see. The Wonderlic. I don't know. I bet Dillon Gabriel I bet he had a high Wonderlic score.
Nobody cares about the Wonderlic anymore.
No, I bet he had a high Wonderlic. But anyway, so in thinking about what tomorrow means, Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports seems to think that it's more about Dillon Gabriel tomorrow than it is anything.
I think the way that they have set this up, it's really a Dillon Gabriel game. Kenny Pickett not playing in this game, and it's not like Joe Flacco's going to see a ton of snaps in this game. I think ultimately what they're going to do is Flacco will get a series or two, and then at that point they're going to focus a large portion of the game on Dillon Gabriel and say to themselves, is it possible this guy can be our backup quarterback? Because if so, now we can figure out what we want to do with Kenny Pickett. They preserve Kenny Pickett from injury by not playing him in this game, which means Kenny Pickett won't play in the preseason. And again, I think that's to preserve for injury, give them options on the table, and then also get an extended look at Dillon Gabriel and say, is he capable enough? If he looks capable enough, I think there is a chance that you could see Dillon Gabriel ended up being the number 2 quarterback on this roster. They figure out what they ultimately want to do with Kenny Pickett, and then, again, with Shedeur as well. Shedeur will play. I would not be surprised, though, if it ends up being a quarter.
All right, so that I do find really interesting, and I think he's dead on. I think the idea that if Dillon Gabriel looks really, really good tomorrow and plays really well, it's 100% on the table that then Kenny Pickett's bags are packed for him. Like, all right, we don't need to see Kenny Pickett. We believe that Dillon Gabriel can be the backup quarterback, and we believe that even if Joe Flacco gets injured early on, we have enough trust and faith that Dillon Gabriel can run the offense. Conversely, if Dillon Gabriel absolutely stinks up the joint tomorrow, then yes, there is reason to believe that they would just keep Kenny Pickett on as a break glass in case of emergency if Joe Flacco does get injured or isn't able to really be functional, which I would doubt.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Like, I kind of wanted Kenny Pickett to be okay this week because then I think this game would have been more about Kenny Pickett than it is Dillon Gabriel, because it would have been the first time we would have seen Kenny Pickett in the preseason, even though we generally know what Kenny Pickett is. But again, organization continues to point to things that we can't necessarily see or don't get to see, and they love Kenny Pickett for whatever reason, so this would have been their chance to be like, okay, let's put Kenny out there and see what he can do and prove to everybody like why we think he's our number 2 quarterback. But yeah, without him out there, I do think it becomes about Dillon Gabriel. And frankly, I think this entire preseason has kind of been about Dillon Gabriel. Like, I know Shedeur is the star of it all, and he's the most polarizing player. We were just having a debate in the media room the other day about how Shedeur Sanders is probably the most famous person on this Browns team, even more so than like Myles Garrett. Somebody threw out Joe Flacco, and I was like, Joe Flacco is not as nearly as famous just because he's
Shedeur's got 3 million Instagram followers. I mean,
like,
what are we talking
there's
about?
no chance that anybody's more famous than him.
Not that that's like the measurement that we should use, but I kind of do use that in many ways.
I think it is kind of our barometer to sort of measure those things.
I mean, what's wrong with it, right? Like if it's a Q score, Myles Garrett's got 1.2 million Instagram followers, and I said Shedeur's got 3 million.
Yeah, there's your answer.
If we just use Instagram alone.
Yeah,
I mean,
more people would know Shedeur Sanders if he showed up just in public than they would if they saw Joe Flacco.
I always look at it like if they're both on two sides of the mall, which mall would then get the most packed the quickest?
Oh yeah, 100%. I like that. I like that analogy. But anyway, he's clearly like the star of all of this. So in many ways, like this entire thing is about Shedeur Sanders. But I think it actually, because of the star that he is, it became more about Dillon Gabriel because he was kind of living in Shedeur's shadow this entire time, and he's the one who has to kind of continue to prove, like, hey, I'm still here. And most steps of the way, he hasn't done that. Most steps of the way, Shedeur has been the better player than him. So I think tomorrow is another opportunity for him to go out and be like, all right, here's why I still belong in this competition that the Browns have just blanket put me in and said I'm the guy and sort of crowned me before I even sort of proved it. And if Shedeur plays great and Dillon just plays okay again, we're all going to be sitting here like, it was just okay. Like, we're all going to be looking at Dillon Gabriel, not Shedeur Sanders. We're going to be like, why is this guy still ahead of him? And I think that's what the preseason's been about just in general.
216-474-0092. Is tomorrow's game all about Dillon Gabriel? For myself, it obviously is, and it's way more about Shedeur Sanders. It's even about just seeing Joe Flacco, even with the acknowledgement that if Joe stinks up the joint, I'm going to be like, well, he didn't need this practice anyway. He'll be fine. And if he's awesome, I'll be like, okay, great. Let's get ready to go.
1-0 against the Bengals.
But from an actual standpoint with this Browns team, I get the case that Charles is making, like the impact of what could change relative to Tuesday when you have to get down to the 53-man roster. And I don't know, maybe a lot of this is just debunked by the fact that we spent so much time today, including with Daryl earlier today, talking about if this means Shedeur could potentially be traded if he just balls out and looks awesome. But there's a lot on the line for Dillon Gabriel and whether or not he can actually get out there.
I also just, I am open to the idea that they trade Kenny Pickett. I've been open to that idea from the beginning of training camp. Since they signed him and then drafted two rookies,
we just need to see him play
I've
at
been
this
open
point.
to it.
Yeah.
But I just, as we sit here and talk about the Browns potentially trading Shedeur Sanders and maximizing the fact that, we drafted him in the 5th, and someone's offering us a 3rd, that's a win in our book. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how they reconcile moving on from Kenny Pickett unless they're getting at least the draft compensation that they traded for him. That's the thing that's a big question to me is would they really trade Kenny, or would they really just cut Kenny Pickett next week because they have to cut the roster down to 53 players and they don't want to keep 4 quarterbacks if they're not going to get anything back in return after they traded DTR and a 5th round pick for him? I think they probably want to try to trade him for some sort of draft compensation back in return, and I just don't know that there's a market for him out there.
Yeah, you see, the hard part about that conversation, though, is that you're either trading him if there's a 5th round pick or someone like that can get it back in return. But the alternative is you keep him on the roster in case Joe Flacco gets injured or whatever, and then you end up playing him. And playing him and not playing him, the difference there is so large for these rookie quarterbacks. And I look at everything through a Shedeur lens, I'll admit that. But the difference there between playing him and not playing him is in many ways the difference between Shedeur even seeing the field this year or seeing enough games to be able to judge him. We're getting that. We get that a little lost in this whole entire discussion, and I think it's so fascinating for a million different reasons. But if I'm Shedeur, I hate the idea that the likelihood of me seeing the field might be dependent on how Dillon Gabriel himself looks tomorrow. And it's not because I'm jumping him and I'm all of a sudden going to become the backup, but it's how the line moves to be able to have enough people to be able to
how many quarterbacks you potentially keep.
Yeah, and this is just not even putting Deshaun Watson even in the equation, dare I say his name.
Oh, gosh, yeah, and this is why the plan makes no sense. Here's the thing: if they had only drafted Dillon Gabriel,
is that the end result? The plan just made no sense, and it took us into a million different equations.
And I think that's sort of been verified, right?
What are the Browns rooting for tomorrow, Spencer? Are they rooting for Dillon to be awesome so they can get rid of Kenny Pickett?
I think they want Dillon Gabriel to be awesome.
Because if he's awesome and then they do what Charles says and they cut Kenny Pickett and then we're down to 3 quarterbacks, there is a scenario that exists where Dillon Gabriel wasn't ready. Dillon Gabriel then does stink, and then you have to go to Shedeur, and then you're hoping beyond hope that Shedeur is the one that's awesome. There's also the scenario out there that if Shedeur is awesome and Dillon Gabriel stinks, then they've really put themselves in a bind as well.
Well, and that's why we've heard a lot of the reporting on like they didn't plan on drafting Shedeur going into that day, and then they talked about it the day of day 3, and they finally pulled the trigger because the value was just too good. Like, I agree, they probably didn't plan on drafting 2 quarterbacks, but like once you did that, I think you needed to alter the plan here. And they haven't. Like, the plan has just stayed the same. It's been, we traded for Kenny Pickett. He was the first guy we got. And then we added Joe Flacco because we couldn't get Kirk Cousins. And so, but like, if the plan just stays the same, like, if you had just one rookie quarterback, it'd be like, okay, we can wait to see him. It's fine. It's Dillon Gabriel, who's a 3rd-round pick. Maybe he's your long-term backup or something like that. But you have 2. And that's the problem. If by drafting 2, you're flat out telling us, we know we don't have a franchise quarterback in this group. Joe Flacco's not going to be here next year. Right. Kenny Pickett's not going to be here next year. You can't possibly go into this year and play both those guys and then be like, there's like 6 games left. Let's see what we got in these rookies. It makes no sense.